We are entering our second panel, which is called Think Differently, Programming for the Future. With shifting political landscapes and a post-pandemic world still on the horizon, in the 2021-22 season will be one of transition. Let's discuss how we are reimagining live event experiences, developing new artist practices and contracts, and being the change that we want to see in the performing arts field. For this panel, the moderator is going to be Diane Eber, who is part of the Office of Performing Arts and Film. Diane Eber is a master of remaining calm and organized in the midst of chaos, with more than 15 years of experience producing and programming live performances. She has spanned the music industry, working at a booking agency, a major record label, and 8 years programming and producing at Brick and Brick Celebrate Brooklyn Festival. As associate producer of Celebrate Brooklyn, she contracted and advanced all performances, hired and managed a seasonal staff of over 100 people, created production schedules and event summaries, led weekly production meetings, and acquired all necessary park department and city permits. Damn, that's a lot. She is able to definitely navigate a diverse population of stakeholders, from production staff to performers and sponsors to attendees. So I'm gonna take it away, Diane.
All right, thanks, Mariana. Welcome, everybody. Good to see you here. We have an amazing panel of badass ladies joining us today to talk about the future of programming. It's such an intense moment for all of us in this world. There's no question art will carry us through, and I really do see it as our job to find new channels for artists to keep doing what they're going to do, which is create art. So thank you to the artists on this call and in the universe for doing that, and we're here to make it happen. So I wanted to introduce our panelists. We've got Kathryn Aberlin from AEG Presents and Bowery Presents here with us to provide an amazing perspective from the commercial promoter world, which is so important for all of us to hear about. So thank you, Kathryn, for being with us. We've got Amy Davidman, an agent who has just sort of peeled off and is starting her own thing, which is really exciting, her own agency with some other partners. We're going to hear more about that. And we've got Simone Eccleston from Kennedy Center here with us. So thank you. We're going to kick it off. I'd love to hear in the chat, where folks are coming from. Are you an artist? Are you an agent? Are you here from the press? We're going to try and have this be an open dialogue and take questions throughout this conversation. We want you guys, to really have this be a working group, have a moment. There's so many questions out there, when are we doing shows again? When is Zoom fatigue gonna ever be over? It's a hard moment for everybody. So let us know in the chat, where you're logging in from, what your perspective is, and that'll help us as we go through this. But I would love to let each of you just introduce yourselves, give us a little, where are you coming from? What's your role in this moment? And then we're going to dig into some questions. So let's kick it off with you, Simone.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's so great to see so many of you guys on the Zoom today. So I'm Simone Eccleston. I'm the Director of Hip Hop Culture and Contemporary Music at the John F. Kennedy Center of Performing Arts. I am on the unceded lands of the Pamunkey and Piscataway, otherwise known as Washington, D.C. And, I'm a curator, presenter, and community builder. And I think that, Diane, you asked us about our relationship to programming in this moment, right? And so I just want to say it's one that's measured. There's like an active or like balanced mix of optimism and hope, and then active contingency planning.
Beautiful. Kathryn, why don't you just give us a little intro to where you're coming from?
Sure.
Hi,
everybody.
In the ecosystem is.
I'm in my apartment right now. There is some construction happening. So if you hear some drilling, I apologize. I have no control over it. I am Kathryn Aberlin. I'm a talent buyer at Bowery Presents and AEG. We mainly focus, obviously, on more of your run-of-the-mill standard concert experience, less of a sort of diverse roster of dance and theater and whatnot. But we are what I like to call in hibernation and or stasis. currently, and really excited for when we can finally do shows again and ready to do them.
Yeah, thank you. Amy, kick us off. Give us a little background on you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Davidman from TBA Agency. We are a small independent agency that just launched in September. My partners and I were formerly at Paradigm and the Windish Agency. And as we saw deconsolidation starting at the hit of the pandemic, we decided to get together and jump into this new future we're looking at and try to stay positive with creating something. And it's been actually, though challenging, really exciting every day to be a part of something new, and also to really re-envision what it means to be a booking agent for an artist and how we can you know, kind of bend and flex and be a little bit more team oriented in this time to really help everyone succeed. I think that's really the path forward, is how does this industry succeed? So I think that's where I'm at right now, and excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right, well, we just got the poll in. There's a lot of presenters in the room, there's a lot of artists, so that's a great place to start. And I'd love to start with hearing from all of you about what kind of a timeline are you looking at? You know, I'm having conversations every day when I'm wearing my Celebrate Brooklyn Massimoka booking hat. And, you know, that's a big question, first question. I would love to actually kick it off with you, Amy, since you're not just thinking about one venue, whereas, you know, Kathryn, Simone, and I are often, you know, we're booking specific places, but what are you hearing in the field? When are you getting offers for? Are we looking at summer? Are we looking at fall? You know, I'm hearing so many different things depending on who you talk to. So I definitely want to hear from all of us, but let's start with Amy.
Sure. Well, that's absolutely true. If I spoke to you, you would tell me different than Kathryn, different than Simone. So you know, my parents ask me what I'm doing all day long. I am just on the phone with everyone in every city, county, state, trying to figure out what they think. You know, everything is just a projection at this point. Everybody's being told something different from their board, you know, whether that's just a comfort level, you know, from their financial staff about where their organization is at, and then regulations that have to do with our immediate communities, and then the state. So it's all a big question mark. I do right now, just as like run-of-the-mill booking agents, we are moving tours, obviously, that were confirmed already, and we're, you know, pushing them more so into 2022. There's definitely a lot of tours that had been moved into the fall of 21 that we are keeping and staying optimistic about, and talking about marketing plans and rollouts. I just had a call about a September-October tour, and we made a whole plan for, you know, the announce, the singles, the whatever that's going to lead into it, and just trying to be as realistic with the information that we have on hand. And I think that actually even changes by artist team, and obviously by presenters and promoters who are within that tour. So if there is a tour and all the promoters are like willing to book it, and the artist is willing to travel, and everybody is kind of on the same page, then it works right now. So I'm still even, you know, juggling some things in the summer. There's obviously a whole bunch of festivals have moved, and then there are others who have really dug their heels in on their dates, or have maybe even pivoted and figured out how to do an outdoor venue. So there's plenty of stuff that is just kind of up in the air in the summer. And for the most part, you know, the way I've looked at my artists, their needs, my roster is who wants to work, where are you based, realistically, what money do you need, or what is the situation, and then which presenters and promoters and festivals and events are happening within a day's drive of where you are. And I'm trying to really focus my attention on those artists who are willing and excited and trying to do that. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of virtual programming that's still happening, and there are artists who are, you know, diving into that. And then there are artists who are really just planning to book tours. And so we're doing that in 21, 22, and we just have to do it like with optimism, I think.
Yeah. And when you say summer, are you looking at things in May, June, like define summer? Because as someone who books a summer festival, I'm like, does summer now mean end of July? Does it mean August and September? What does summer mean?
I definitely had dates booked in like probably the cusp of June and July, and there's a number of presenters probably who are on this call who have now told me, well, it's July forward, and I'm taking that tour and trying to put everything that was in the last week of June into the second week of July. Cool. So yeah, I mean, it seems like overall that there are things that, you know, again, it's hard to generalize.
Sure, no, it's helpful.
Festival in Florida that's trying to really, you know, hold on to May. Obviously, there's like Newport Folk Festival is still there, Lollapalooza is still there, Osheaga is still there, Montreal Jazz Fest. There's there are quite a few that still have their feet planted in the summer.
Cool. And Kathryn, in terms of timeline for you and your world, what's being talked about? You know, just to have a sort of view into that would be so helpful for the folks in this room.
So it's a lot of the same that Amy, because obviously we would work with Amy as well. We have a handful of, like, anything in May or June, especially in New York City, we're not assuming are going to happen. There is a little bit of hope that maybe outdoors in some form, we have no idea what form that will take because we have no guidance. Maybe end of July into August, some sort of cut down version of normal outdoor shows, because it'll be safer, still socially distanced and all that. But again, nothing set in stone. No one's actually said anything about that. We're hoping September 1. That's what we're pre-Christmas we were talking about, planning and budgeting and whatnot, because we have to do all of that. Everyone has to do that. And now it's starting to feel, okay, maybe September might be a little more difficult. I mean, so much is dependent on the vaccine rollout. We've seen how it has not been very smooth, although we are in like the infancy of the new administration. So things could change rapidly, and that would be amazing. And we could be having a different conversation in a month. Right now, it does feel like people are they're sticking with what they have in the fall and being hopeful, but also having backup dates in 2022, just so that if we don't get there, they're not in a terrible position and there are no dates. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
And are you thinking September 1 for indoors as well, or is that strictly outdoors? Like, what does that mean?
That's what we're hoping.
Yeah.
Whether indoor is, you know, a socially distanced version, you know, pods, that kind of thing. Okay. All of that we don't know either. Right now, we're just sort of assuming September 1st, if we can do business as usual, this is what it's going to look like. These are the calendars we have. We all are eating many, many grains of salt when we're doing that, because we know that it might not happen, you know, that's with some local acts, but then we also have dates confirmed with international artists. And then there's the added question of, okay, well, how are those vaccine rollouts going in those countries? What's the visa process going to be? You know, we love having all of these shows on the books. Our calendars are stacked for the fall. Is that going to stay that way? Perhaps not.
Yeah, great. And Simone, what does timelines look for you in your world? What are folks talking about at the Kennedy Center? What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, it's an active mix, and much like Kathryn and Amy have shared, we're definitely very much in alignment with them. So we are continuing some work that we've done with our On Stage series, and so we'll be taping some kind of intimate, like invited audience performances that also have a streaming component. It's like a digital platform, but we're doing that in the kind of like spring, early summer months. But then we're actively planning for FY22. And so for us, you know, as an institution and as a field, like FY22 is a recovery year, but it's also our 50th anniversary. So we are also, you know, really thinking about like, how do we thoughtfully and like radically reimagine who we are as the nation's cultural center, who we are as an institution, how we serve as a home for artists in our communities, and also what does it mean to serve, right? So like thinking about all of those things. But then in regards to timelines, you know, like our goal is to be back in-house in the fall, which is ambitious, but also completely dependent upon where we are in the grand scheme of things, right? So it's like, where will we be in terms of vaccination rollout and achieving herd immunity? If we're not there, then clearly we're going to have to pivot. But what I can say is that, at least in the conversations that I've been having with artists for which we are exploring fall dates, I'm also at the same time discussing alternate spring dates. So it's not okay, we're not hitting the mark, so now we have to identify new dates. I'm coming to the table with 2 sets of dates so that we're actively working in partnership.
Yeah, that's cool. And I'd love to hear in the chat, since we've got so many presenters with us, if you're willing to share, what are you thinking in terms of timeline? It's been so interesting at every point in the pandemic talking to presenters who are like, oh, we're going gangbusters. We're putting budget lines in for rapid testing. You know, we want to do this. And if you have a festival, for example, outside, you have to make a decision like now. Are you booking bands? Are you announcing? Are you selling tickets? You know, some of us can be in a sort of privileged position of you don't have to worry about tickets because you're a free festival. But for a lot of folks, it's like go or no go. And it's such a pivotal, hard moment. I would like to take a minute and talk amongst this group about indoors versus outdoors and what we think that will mean. And again, Amy, if you don't mind, I'm going to kick it off with you since you're talking to, you know, talent people in both worlds, presenters who are probably calling you about indoors and outdoors.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I have a show that is in Oklahoma in April, and
wow.
it's announced and selling tickets right now. And we moved it from you know, one show 1,100 capacity to an early and a late show 300 capacity each show.
Okay.
So
indoors, outdoors?
Indoors.
Okay.
So, you know, that conversation goes like, okay, what are your safety protocols? How are you, you know, running the venue? And then obviously the artist feels comfortable traveling and taking their own precautions. And so they feel like they can make that happen if everything else can happen around it, right? So then there's also a conversation going on about, well, what happens if there's a spike in cases and it's shut down and we've already spent, you know, spent money, you know, expenses have been paid. I think somebody mentioned something about contracts. You know, I think contracts are going to be really important in this time frame, obviously, but something that got brought up at one of the APAP sessions, and I don't remember what it was, but I thought it was a really fascinating conversation, was just about kind of trying to take a step back from what the contract, like how vicious some of these contracts can be, and that we are all people and we're all trying to figure out how to make this work. And that if agents and presenters can really come to the table with a real human to human discussion about a timeline and talking about all the different little aspects of, okay, well, if this happens, then what happens, and who's taking responsibility and how are we sharing in this, that is going to help all of these things unroll, I think. I mean, that's obviously contracts have to be there and be in place, but are we all ready to just like be suing each other over? I mean, this is like, we're dealing with our lives, the artists' lives, their livelihoods. Like, I think we have to pay attention to that. I know that's not really, I spun out on a different topic, but like I said, I have to move forward with booking as if things are going to be at 100% indoors in September. I mean, there has to be a level of like fake it till you make it kind of thing right now, because we can't just do nothing. And what I've been enjoying is really when I can talk to presenters more as a group, and I have had a run, it was all in Washington State. We were talking about moving it to November. We actually all got on a Zoom together. The majority of I don't know if anybody's here, but the majority of the presenters were like, we just don't feel comfortable in 2021. Can we please just move this to 2022? So we all figured out when that was going to work. Obviously that works with a smaller tour and a group of presenters who all know each other. I probably can't do that with like a club tour that I would be booking with, Bowery Presents. It's a little bit of a different story, but you have to kind of test the waters based on everything that you're dealing with, whether it's like a full tour, is it regional, is it just a state, is it across the entire country, where are people flying in, all of that. Outdoor to me feels really great right now. I have a lot of artists who just really want to play and they feel comfortable playing outdoors with safety precautions. So I do feel like I'm trying to spend as much time as I can booking things right now that will play. So that means like who is doing outdoor stuff starting in whenever May. What are your real budgets? What are you working with? Let's try to make something happen. Like I have plenty of artists who really want to work, and if you have an outdoor venue and, who knows, like maybe they're only a couple hours away. So indoors, fake it till you make it kind of, and then outdoors, like bring it on, because I think everybody's trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, the question of outdoors, some of us have venues that are typically outdoors. Obviously, Celebrate Brooklyn's a prime example. Mass Mocha, we have lots of outdoor space. But for Kathryn and Simone, where, your core venues are really inside, is there talk of like, let's turn a parking lot, I don't know, into a beer garden, let's make a stage on a rooftop? Like, is that being discussed? And I'll kick it. I know, Simone, you've mentioned some thinking with the Reach, and you guys just opened that. But Simone, why don't you kick us off with what, if you guys are thinking that, or if you're really focused on getting folks back indoors?
Sure. We opened our expansion campus in the fall of 2019, known as the Reach. It is beautiful and just such an exciting venture for us. And we were able to utilize it in the fall of 2020 to do some, outdoor performances and activations like our Sunset concert series. And there were frontline worker, like thank you events that were shepherded by the impact team, right? That was fantastic. But like now I think the curatorial team is definitely kind of pushing for us being able to utilize our outdoor space, but it is, a question of like whether or not it's economically viable for us, because it's like we would have to construct a stage, and the costs for that are substantive. And so I think we're actively having that conversation as to whether or not it's financially viable. We're definitely pushing for indoors because that's just like the nature of that's kind of where we are in this moment. But I think the challenge is that like it's not economically viable if you don't have full capacity, right? Like it's like we are not going to be able to advance real conversations with, higher visibility artists and make sure that it's like we're able to kind of like meet their financial needs and hit our like revenue goals. So we have to be like really realistic about that. And so, some of it is, like, do we have to look at hybrid presentations and like what is the model for that in regards to like if we have to do reduced capacity, is it that we partner with like a media partner or streaming partner in order to kind of underwrite costs, or look at paid tickets and kind of hitting that kind of global or virtual audience. But you have to kind of think about at what point do you tap out your virtual audience? It's like, and in terms of like artists making choices, like it's like you're not going to exhaust your virtual audience. So I think artists now are getting more and more strategic about the things that they do online. and the ways in which they're generating revenue in that way. And so, you know, like for us, if we can find a way to make it financially viable to do outdoor programming in the summer and fall months, we definitely would pursue that as an institution. But we are actively kind of looking at going back indoors, because that's the construct in which we operate.
Totally. No, it all makes so much sense. Kathryn, are you guys having conversations about these types of things in the Bowery?
Well, it's a little difficult for us, especially in New York, because spaces doesn't exist, as we know. And so we don't really have much outdoor space. But then the other hurdle that we've experienced is that, you know, we don't own most of our buildings, right? We have long-term leases on our clubs. And when we had to shut down, we requested rent abatements because we were completely dark and nothing was going on. So as soon as we start doing something, does that then trigger for our landlord, you know, and then is it, and similar to Simone, a reduced capacity show financially for us, it might not even make sense for us to turn the lights on, you know, and are we going to start doing that and then there's going to be a spike and we're going to have to shut down again? You know, we also had to unfortunately furlough a lot of people when this happened. You can't just take someone temporarily off furlough. So it's a lot of gaming out whether or not, you know, is this financially viable for all of us to do this, as much as we sincerely want to do it, because this is the business that we love, you know. But unfortunately, we are in the mass gathering business, and the majority of our venues are general admission venues as well. So to social distance within that, and then also, you know, limited space backstage, the function, like just the actual workings of how the event is produced back of house, we need to take into consideration the health and safety of all of those staff members, you know. And you know, obviously there's going to be more sanitizing and all that. That's going to just be standard at every venue. But if we wanted to do temperature checks, whose responsibility is that? Are we asking our security staff to do that? Are they trained to do that? Do we need to hire, you know, we don't have a robust checklist in order to open up yet. And so that's also really limited us, because we don't want to put anyone at risk as much as we want people in our rooms and enjoying themselves. We have to be responsible and respect our patrons and our staff and the artists, everyone.
Yeah.
So it's been tough.
So hard. And, you know, love to everybody in the room for just enduring this and being here together on Zoom when we all have Zoom fatigue, to have these conversations. It feels nice to all be together. A question for all of you. I remember early on in the pandemic, which is crazy now that we're talking like, I don't know, a year ago, started in March. And there was a lot of talk of like, okay, are we going to put out offers at 75% cap, you get this much, and then 50% capacity this. And I'm seeing a trend that nobody's really doing that I'm hearing about. And again, presenters out there listening, jump in the chat. But it seems like folks are sort of moving away from that and moving towards this, let's work together, where we're going to try and do, like Simone, you said, you know, a backup date or human to human, like, here we go, we want to do this, here are the deal terms, but we both know it may not happen. What are you all seeing in terms of specific language or way people are approaching, or maybe I'm wrong and people are putting out offers with reduced capacity, but I think the numbers don't really work for most of us. It's like you're barely scraping by at a sold out show. So, and again, Amy, I'm going to kick it off to you, but what are you seeing? It just sort of works because you talk to so many of us. What are you seeing in terms of how offers are coming in, if they're coming in? And, you know, how people are dealing with that?
Yeah, I don't think anyone's really hopefully planning for any of this like reduced capacity stuff. The only time I've really seen that was for these shows in the first half of this year, where we had confirmed shows and we were just trying to make them work by doing reduced capacity and splitting them. And I definitely got a bunch of those offers, but now we're just moving all those shows again into 2022. And so, yeah, it's most folks really need to just look at their full capacity. The numbers just don't work. Or there are some situations where I've figured out how to, I mean, it's pretty laborious, I have to say, to talk about one show that's a smaller capacity than an artist would have normally played, and to try to look at how that venue is functioning with what expenses they have, and then how can the artist bring every little thing down just to play, literally not to make any money, but just to stay positive in their life. So like, I feel like a lot of the booking is about that right now. It's like, if the artist really wants to play and is looking for opportunities, then they're also sitting there and looking at all of their expenses and trying to figure out how to make those two things happen together. So yeah, it's like the work of booking 5 tours is now the same work as booking one show. And when it happens, it's like really exciting. But not a lot of that is going to be happening, you know?
Yeah. And Kathryn, in your world, oh, go ahead, Simone.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Because it's like, in thinking about the artist, you know, it's like, if an artist wants to play and they're cutting down on expenses, like, it's like, I'm just trying to think about like equity and like fair compensation. You know, it's like, there are like lots of relationships that we foster in the field, and you know, there are artists that will, you know, it's like you put in a call and they will show up because your relationship is just that strong, right? The partnership, it's longstanding. But you know, like, I'm just curious about like whether or not there's a sentiment of like care and value, and like whether or not that is still holding, because it's like, we've talked about, you know, kind of being artist centered. And I just wonder, like, it's like, is that thought in regards to like, if you're doing a digital stream, are you being paid fair compensation? You know, because it's like the kind of time and labor that it takes to put together a set is still comparable to what you would do if you're going to a venue to perform, right? It's like, take out travel expenses, etc. But it's still, there's still like labor in that. And so I'm just like wondering if in these like offers and contracts during these times, like whether or not your artists are feeling like valued.
I think that basically, I haven't run into any situations where an artist is willing to do something and have to come out of pocket. I mean, they just can't. There's just, most of them cannot, but also a lot of them, their careers, a lot of their income was based on touring. And so it really comes down to the exact situation, just like you're saying. Often it's a long-term relationship. Often it's an artist and a presenter, a promoter who've worked together for a really long time. They might have a very different season or show that they're thinking about that they want the artist for. And we're just really trying to talk about what can make it possible. So I'm trying to be really realistic with the artist to figure out what is that number that makes this possible and worth your time. But maybe it's not the same that was before. Maybe there's a way that we can adjust things so that it does work for everyone. And if it's successful, that there is a way to make more or use the content again, or whatever that is. So yeah, it's a complicated, and so I have, you know, a number of artists who would be open to doing stuff, but they said no to a lot of stuff because they just don't feel like everything they have to put in on their end, even if it's a stream, you know, they have to bring in people into their space. They want the production to be good. They don't want to just do it from their bedroom. And so all of that costs more for one show than like if they were doing a rehearsal for a whole tour, right? So yeah, it does end up being really like event by event. And I have just tried to be really the best mediator between all parties to try to figure out how to make it work. But at the end of the day, also, you know, if I mean, this just came up where I got an email about an artist taking part in a whole educational component for a show that like never was there, like wasn't on the offer. It was never discussed. And instead of maybe reacting the way it would have before, which was like, that wasn't on the offer, you can't do that, you know, you're not valuing the artist's time. Instead, I just thought like, okay, let me just get on the phone with this person, because they're not coming from like a crazy point of view where they're like trying to abuse the artist's time. They clearly just want something. They're just thinking about it from a different point of view that is probably very self-centered in their presenting organization or whatever, but let's just talk about it. I mean, everything they're suggesting doesn't work because it would cost the artist so much money to put in all this stuff for this educational component, but the artist is generally open to like doing educational stuff when it's not going to cost them an arm and a leg. So let's see, maybe there's a way we can find something. Again, it wasn't part of the deal and it wasn't agreed upon, but it's not worth like the strife. But if it doesn't work for the artist, then no, it doesn't work. We didn't confirm that. Do you know what I mean? That's where I feel like the conversation is different right now, and it's taking a lot more time, but I do think it feels like there's been less like nasty conflict. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, there is a bit of zen-ness. And Kathryn, in your world, is there talk of offers that include, okay, you're going to play on stage in front of hopefully a ticketed audience, and in addition to that, we're going to live stream this and put it out there? Is that being talked about in the kind of commercial?
Not at this point. You know, all of our offers that we're sending out are under the assumption that we are full capacity with language that if state or city regulations dictate that we need to have a smaller capacity, then we're going to revisit the offer. It's going to be an ongoing conversation, very similar to what Amy says. Like, we know we have to make it work and we have to be open to new ideas. But right now our fingers are just crossed that we can just do what we normally do.
Yeah.
We've had some conversations about streaming. The main issue that has come up is that the lighting that you need for a live stream to look really good and the lighting that you need for a live show when you're in the crowd are very, very, very different. And so to have a really good quality coexist can be very difficult. You know, live streaming without an audience is obviously possible and just something that it's taken us some time. You know, we've had some issues with the landlord stuff and all that kind of, you know, and staffing, but it's floating out there. We will see. Not a main focal point at the moment.
Yeah, that's so interesting to think about that. And I know in the, you know, presenter community conversations I'm in, there's a lot of talk of what can we do to support artists? You know, that's why we're all in this world together, is because something spoke to us, made us feel alive. When artists are doing their thing, that's why we're here. We're vehicles to get them channels, modes of expression. And I think there's no real answer, but also, you know, the live stream exhaustion is real. We're all on our screens all day. Do you really want to log in at night and see another live stream? Maybe. Seems like a pretty steep sell, but we've had some amazing luck with some auditory programming at Mass MoCA, where artists are creating soundtracks that museum goers can walk through and feel COVID safe. And that's been such a gift. Artists are like, yes, I want to do that. Like, let me make music, you know, and not be like, do I look good? Is the lighting good? Or I don't know, my bedroom was never supposed to be my stage. And that's hard. And I wonder, you know, Simone, in your world, I know Kennedy Center's always done such amazing work with, you know, community and getting people involved, but you know, what is being talked about or thought about how to support artists in these times where, you know, we can dream about the fall, we can dream about this summer, but that might not be realistic. And it's so hard because the institutions are losing funding. You know, you're not selling the beer you need to sell, Kathryn, to keep the venues open. But you know, what can we do to keep artists creating? I don't know, I'll kick it off with you, Simone, not to put you on the spot, but just where your head's at, your thoughts at for that, how to support artists.
It's perfectly fine. I mean, I think that there are a mix of things, and you know, it's like the center is comprised of a diverse constellation of like programmers or curators. And so like we all have different approaches. But I would say, you know, like in this moment, like I find myself kind of, at least from like kind of my perch, really kind of like engaging artists that we have had, you know, like, or have been building relationship with substantially over time, and kind of like looking at how we can go deeper, right? So some of the conversations that I've had with artists had to do, you know, just in saying like, hey, what do you need? You know, like outside of money, it's also space. It's like the opportunity to continue to work out ideas. And so, you know, like I was talking to a friend, just incredible musician that we've worked with for quite some time. And, you know, he's like, you know, being out on the road, that's the opportunity for us to continue to work out ideas, to continue to be in conversation. And in this moment of like being kind of stuck indoors and remote, like it's like that act of continuous exchange and listening and conversation that you experience through the bandstand, like that's not happening in the same way. And so it's like, what happens if we engage in kind of like more residencies? You know, like I think about like, I'm using Glassware as an example in this moment, because we were able to kind of work with him over the course of the pandemic, and he came and did like a digital onstage for us. But that was like his first time doing an in-person gig in about like 8 months. And so like just the dynamism and exchange between him and the artist and the audience, and like the co-creation that happens, because he's someone who like composes his set list when he's in the presence of his audience. So it's like, how do we create opportunities for artists to continue to work out music and content? You know, like when we're able to get back in real time, how do we ensure that, you know, in this moment of recovery, that we're not discounting their value, right? Like, it's like, we understand that we're all kind of like trying to figure out like what the economic model is as we return, right? Thinking about, okay, if we're in the midst of an economic recession, our audiences may not spend, you know, like $125 to see an artist. They may not spend 75. So it's like thinking about like, what is that? Like, what is the model that allows us to fairly compensate artists in ways that they feel honored and value, that allows us to simultaneously meet our like revenue goals and also honors like our audience. So I think it's like just thinking about all of those things. And it's like, even as we think about in-person programming and think about like the parallel digital content that's created, right? Because it's like, regardless, once we're back in real time, we're still going to need to have a digital strategy in place. Like, how do we continue to build that? And also, like, when we talk about shifting systems, like not replicate what may be seen as like exploitative practices as it relates to the compensation of artists in the construction of deals.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm loving all the chat action. I see you chatters out there, so keep it coming, keep the conversations going. It's bringing me back to a point that I would love to hear from all of you. There's a lot of discussion of what is the appetite gonna be for ticket buyers? Are they like chomping at the bit for somebody to say it's safe, you can come, you can, you know, buy a ticket to something? Are they gonna be trepidatious? You know, obviously it's gonna be some combination. A lot of it depends on the vaccine rollout. None of us are doctors. We don't have to pretend that we are, but curious, Kathryn, what you're hearing in your world, like, you know, is the plan like, we're going to have, you know, I know a lot of talk of the fall being very busy and almost a crowded space. Like there's so many artists and like, let's book. So what's being discussed in sort of your world in regards to ticket buying behavior once we can sell tickets?
I mean, we've found, you know, especially with all of the refunds that we've had to do and whatnot, that there's a lot of people that are eager, super eager. They're holding on to their tickets. They want to be there. They want to come to the show. They want to support the artist. They want to see that. They want to be with their friends. They want to do all the things that we love about concerts. I just had a total brain fart. Sorry about that.
All good. Safe space.
Yeah.
There's just 134 people watching.
Yeah, no big deal. No big deal. So we're hoping too that when the floodgates do open, you know, we talk internally a lot and refer to it as the roaring 20s. we hope it's going to be like the Roaring 20s, that people are going to be so so excited to finally be out and about and back living a pseudo normal life, that, you know, they're just going to go crazy. Now, there is also obviously concern about people's financial situation. There are so many people that have been unemployed for so long. There are so many people that are on reduced salaries. I do think that, you know, we were kind of starting to see a bit of a craziness in ticket prices and production and all of these other, you know, which was also driving up ticket price. And you know, I started working for Bowery in 2008, so right during the recession, and we were able to still stay alive. You know, there were people that wanted to come to shows, but it did mean, you know, the ticket prices went down. It did mean that there might have been less bells and whistles on stage, so that the acts didn't need to have that much money and could actually make money. And so I think it's going to be a mixture of that. There are definitely people that have done very well during all of this, and those people are going to buy tickets and they'll be there. But music and arts are about having access to everyone. And so being aware of that and being ready to make those changes and have those conversations with artists, sometimes saying, you know, like, look, I know that you bumped your ticket price up this much last time, but maybe stick around there, consider bumping it down a couple bucks, because, you know, your fan base is younger, or, you know, all those things are important to consider.
Yeah. And are you getting a sense, Amy, maybe this one's for you, from artists? And I know you said there's some artists who are just eager to play, but especially folks who are used to getting, you know, higher deals. And it's such a tricky time, because it's like the artists need that income. The, you know, presenters are struggling, ticket buyers are struggling. Like, finding that balance is going to be hard. It's going to be hard for everybody involved, and so important to get art out there again. So, you know, it's interesting to hear that coming from you, Kathryn. Amy, are you getting a sense from artists like, yeah, last year we were making this much, this year we want to be making this much, or setting, you know, approaching it differently without it just feeling like, you know, they're not getting equitably paid, which they desperately need?
I mean, again, it goes back to just what's possible for that artist.
Yeah.
And so we did see festival offers in a lot of situations go down. What I tried to do was I tried to make sure that if a festival offer was being reduced, that it was being reduced across the board at the same percentage, and that if the festival was going to hit a certain number of tickets bought, that the artist's fee was going to go back to the original fee. So I think kind of looking at structures like that is really helpful. And then that still means that an artist has to weigh it out and figure out if they can afford it or if it's worthwhile for them. You know, it's really interesting. I was just realizing that, you know, the way that I work, my roster really has feet in the club touring world and in the performing arts world. And they're just really different ways of operating in terms of touring. So I can hear everything that Kathryn and Simone are saying, but they really apply to different artists and different tours. It's just a really different structure. So I do think that performing arts organizations, if there is more of a structure or a different kind of a structure that is not necessarily just based on ticket gross, then there potentially are other ways of opening up opportunities for artists. And I would encourage everyone in that field to really keep thinking about their structures, because I do think it's really interesting, and potentially reaching outside of the genres and types of artists that they're looking at typically. Because like I said, I'm constantly working in both worlds. And I really love it when I can get somebody to like cross over to the other side. But it's hard. And I do think that there's a lot of the performing arts organizations just may have some extra tools and resources sometimes than independent promoters. obviously Bowery Presents as part of AEG, so that's even another layer to the story. But but with, you know, club buyers who are really basing each offer off of just the ticket sales, typically, I mean, sure, they have a bar and what, you know, there are some, you know, little hidden layers of income there, but not a ton. It just becomes really hard to like, there's not a lot of areas where you can like rework a deal. You know, it's like either it works or it doesn't. And presenters who want to go to like just, or sorry, promoters, I think club promoters who want to go to like, sorry, like you're just going to get a door deal now. Like, and most of my artists can't do that. And so that's just going to be like a reality check, like a conversation where I'm saying, look, we want to keep this show or we want to book this show, but like we can't, it's just impossible to do it at a door deal. Like, let's try to figure out some other way to build this so that it works for an artist.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is this question of door deal, door split versus an artist guarantee. And I know for a lot of presenters in the room, they only do, you know, guarantees. That's how they book. And Kathryn, you're probably sort of rarely in that. And I would assume you're usually doing some kind of a split. Is there any talk, Kathryn or Simone, love to hear from you too, in terms of, you know, rejiggering some of those deals in terms of guarantees versus door splits? You know, what percentage are you starting to share ticket sales?
Yeah, I mean, we, especially very early on when we were moving stuff almost a year ago, it became, you know, there are certain shows, certain artists, they're going to perform well no matter what, you know. We took the stance of, if we felt like, you know, maybe the show was selling okay, we're not sure what things are going to look like, let's now work in a structure where we lower the guarantee, but at certain, you know, certain marks you hit on ticket sales, we're going to bump that back up, right? So we're going to be able to find a way to get you back to what we had initially budgeted, but in a way that's fair to everybody. So if we can't, if things don't turn out, you know, and inevitably most of those shows ended up getting canceled because they just didn't want to wait that long to perform, and it was easier to just, you know, get everyone their money back and take the time and be patient and then circle back around. But we were very much open to having a dialogue about a way that, because I mean, I know I saw someone mention Live Nation just blanket cutting everyone's in the chat. That was definitely something that we didn't do. That was nothing that we ever wanted to do, and that was not just Bowery related, that was company-wide. For AEG, we wanted to try and maintain a friendly artist relationship because that's what we pride ourselves on having all the time. And but also having a really honest dialogue. This situation is something that we've never been in before. We want to make this work. If we can make this work, let's try and figure this out together.
Cool.
And I just want to pipe in there because I think that is, it's just, I don't know if every agent's really doing this. You guys talk to more agents than I do, but I think that having that open dialogue is really important, but also just being able to like express your frustration is also really important. And, you know, I had a situation with Bowery Presents. I'll just give you a little example.
There we go.
With a mostly sold out tour that had to be moved, and there was the New York show, the Bowery Presents New York shows were 3 shows. 2 had sold out, and 1 was kind of like trickling on in the situation that it was in back in like March of last year, right? So not just where the tickets were at, but kind of, you know, seeing how they had been selling and what the expectation was then. Well, when I moved the tour, I wanted the tour to stay the exact same way, but the buyer at Bowery Presents did not want that 3rd show anymore. And we had to have a real conversation where I disagreed, and they needed to be realistic on their end. I get it. There were still tickets sold for that show. Where are those people going to go? I don't know where those people are going to go, right? So we tried to come up with a plan where maybe a third show could somehow be worked back in. And that's where you're just like, we're all dealing with the same reality without a crystal ball about who's going to get a refund on their tickets, who's going to want to show up and go to those shows, who's going to be buying a new ticket. Would none of us know. And so, you know, I know that we're like about to wrap up, but I just have to go back to this point of like really having conversations with each other and trying to hear us all out about the positions that we're in and what we need to do to just get this entire industry going again, and for all of us to be successful together. I know that's like a real kumbaya thing, but we need it. We need that dialogue to be real and transparent, and to be able to voice our concerns and frustrations too. I mean, you know, we're all looking out for our own businesses and clients too, but like we have to come together to make it actually roll out in a successful way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, and we've got 3 minutes left together. This has been so great, and really feel like we went to some deep places, and great to have some artists and other folks in the room to hear this. We're out there trying to figure it out all together. I certainly feel a sense of sort of camaraderie on a new level with agents and colleagues, you know, in a business where we're all like nice people, but we've each got our own hustles going on, and there's certainly a feeling of that that's coming around. So we want to talk you through what's going to happen next. You will, if you can stick around, we're going to have 15 minutes of breakout rooms where you'll be paired with one of us to go a little deeper and have a chance to really hear from all of you. I know you all have been chatting in the chat, which is great, but we want to give a chance, you know, just for some organic conversation to happen. And again, if you're looking to reach out to anybody that you see on panels throughout these 2 days, you can always send an email to Kathryn or Ian, who I think is at info@globalfest. They'll put it in the chat. Because I know there's just, you know, there's a lot of questions, and I do really think that the way we're going to get through it is sharing information, even if it's, I don't know what I'm thinking. I know it's helping me having calls with all of you on our panelists or other folks as we figure this out together. And, you know, to the artists in the room, like, just keep doing what you're doing, find space, whether it's playing guitar for your kids as they fall asleep at night, or, you know, learning how to make solo electronic music, whatever it is, art will carry us through. So,
thank you so much to Diane, Amy, Simone, Kathryn. It was really, I mean, all these things that are on all of our minds and, you know, need to be discussed. So again, more fuel to keep going and to keep sort of reimagining our future in this field.